What's up, everybody? Welcome into a winning edition of SSPN Postgame. The Spurs bounce back against the Blazers back home in San Antonio. Let's pull up the final score here so I can remember exactly what it was. 118 to 105. Man, what a team performance tonight, Ethan.
Yeah, it was much needed, top to bottom. We can go into details here in a little bit, but just overall, much more intense. Offensively, we looked much more in control overall, better spacing, better ball placement for some of these guys. And then defensively, we weren't perfect, but I still feel like the intention was there, and we didn't look nearly as lost without Jeremy Sohan on the court.
And the effort, I would say, was
Mhm.
definitely upped as well. The intensity on both sides of the floor, but specifically defensively, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
it wasn't perfect overall, but there was always, a ton of want to that popped, out on the eye test.
It helps that you shoot 41% from 3 and the Blazers shot 28%, and the turnover battle was pretty much even the entire time, but we out-assisted them. I think it was 35 to 23. So definitely the ball movement was there tonight.
Couldn't have said it better myself. There were some other stats that I'm pulling up here. I'm trying to remember. We out rebounded them by just a little bit. Um, 35 to 23 on assists. To the
Mm.
point about the ball movement, that definitely stood out. We still did lose the turnover battle, but not as badly
Mm.
as we had before. Also, you can see their points conceded off turnovers. So even though we had more turnovers than them, they actually gave up more points. That was another thing. You also saw the transition game tonight, and in the
Yep.
first half, our points in the paint, we were actually winning that pretty significantly. So they kind of came back there in the second half on that one, but still we were able to shoot from outside, like you mentioned, and hold off a lot of the runs in the second half. But let's just dive into this quarter by quarter, Ethan. I'll dish it to you for the first, where we won 33 to 27.
Yeah, I tried a different note-taking format this time.
Okay.
Usually, I go for, like, the kinda play-by-play, significant plays specific type thing, but since you're kinda doing that with your notes, I decided to just go big picture. So I said first quarter, immediately more physical and more intense than the previous game. Better off-ball movement, better cutting. We saw that from Malachi Branham, we saw that from Keldon Johnson, Steph Castle, Harrison Barnes, etcetera. Better spacing overall. Wemby's still not getting in the low block super often, but I think that's by design. But I liked where he was getting the ball tonight better than in previous games. He wasn't getting pushed completely out of place into the 3-point line. He was able to maintain his dribble and find the open man more often than not, which was definitely an improvement compared to previous games. Still missing some things defensively, but it helps when we hit open shots. So we were able to win the quarter 33 to 27.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a good point that you bring up there, because probably what for a blanket term around the NBA, lower than 25 points, closer to 20 points is probably what people would consider a good defensive quarter. We
Mhm.
gave up 27, but like you said, because we were shooting so well, we put up 33, which allowed for kind of that 5-point win.
For sure.
Um, kind of like I'm still repeating some of the stuff that you just said right there, even though I've got some specific plays, even from the jump. Much better start already at 5-0 is what I wrote down. And that was only like, a minute to 2 minutes into the game. But from the jump, like you said, you could see the intensity, as well as just the cohesiveness, like we talked about last night, that was not there whatsoever. You
Mm.
kind of saw that from the jump with the ball movement offensively. And like you said, as much as there might have still been some lapses here and there individually by guys defensively, I think we were still more connected overall on that side of the floor, especially at least in comparison to last night. And there were still some guys, that can make shots that we had to guard tonight. We'll get
Mhm.
into some of the positive defensive plays maybe a little bit later from some other guys. Like there's one that stands out in my head, but I won't get too off track here. Um, Better rotations, ball pressure, and intensity on switches. Again, there were still some missed things here and there, but we were trying to recover, with much more intensity than we were last night. Lots of intentional off-ball movement, 2 cuts from Harrison Barnes early in the game that led to layups. You saw him cutting all night, and a lot of backdoors throughout the night from the whole team. Champagny was hitting some shots to start as well. That's another
Mm,
point that we've been talking about, him starting strong. That continued throughout the rest of the game. And another thing that I liked here, we went down 15-13. We called a timeout and we responded. Obviously that timeout did a positive, which it did not happen in the past 2 games, at least in the latter half of that Clippers game on Monday. We were able to go on a little mini run to get the lead to 19-16, calling Portland to call a timeout. Another thing, Scoot tried to dunk on
mm,
Zach Collins like crazily in the first half, and he stood up and stopped it. And that was another thing. Not to just go through all the other quarters here, but Zach's interior defense was, much improved tonight from what we've seen from him over the last, sample of regular season games, not just this season, but going back to last season also. KJ was playing really well, playing
mm.
strong on Donovan Clingan
Yep.
as well. He played good overall, but this is specifically, he got a bucket on him, challenging him at the rim, someone who's, much bigger than him, and then also forced a miss when he was the undersized guy, like right under the basket. So
Yeah.
those were 2 real good possessions from KJ in a mismatch that, you love to see that. The intensity was much higher overall, but man, the bench is really the story of this game tonight, and why the Spurs won. And there are a lot of people that played well on the bench, but I think the energy, if I had to pick one person, everybody kind of brought energy, but Blake Wesley's intensity
Mm,
from the jump when he came on the floor really made an impact. I know that's your boy, so kind of
yep.
I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it really started in the second quarter, but his energy was definitely there. We talked about it briefly for last game, but it was such a big blowout loss to Houston that it really didn't translate into anything. It was really just him kind of, doing more than the other guy, but didn't affect the game at all. Tonight it affected the game, and it started on the defensive side of the ball. He was hounding, he was ball pressuring, and that's what he does best. But it was offensively that really caught me off guard. 4 for 4 tonight, perfect from the field, 10 points, 8 assists. He had 2 turnovers. I don't remember the specific instances, but if you watch the game, you know that he played really under control, high intelligent basketball. And the biggest thing is he pushed the pace in transition. And that starts defensively. We have to get stops, but we were finally able to play in transition, which is where we're best. And that's felt like a struggle in the past couple of games because our defensive intensity hasn't been there. That's what Blake Wesley provided us tonight.
Yeah, the transition game, that was another key of tonight overall. Obviously, as we've talked about, we still want to see some half court sets. And I want to say I saw Stephon Castle run a couple half court sets that Chris Paul was involved in as well. There were a lot more plays and
Mhm.
organization tonight, but also just with the way that this team is built, playing in transition is a huge part of our success. That was
Mm.
completely off the table last night. So to see the flip tonight was definitely a positive, and that had a big thing to do with the result. The last thing I'll say on the first quarter, there was a crazy highlight fadeaway 3 from Wemby on
Yeah.
Jeremy Grant. Just wanted to mention that, but I'll dish it back to you for the second.
Yeah, second quarter, kind of same format for me. Aggressive Wemby is a better Wemby. The placement of him on the floor is also better, and we heard Mitch Johnson talk about that in the post game against Houston, as well as the pregame tonight, where he felt like the coaching staff needed to get him in better positions. I felt like there was a conscious effort to do that in this game. Playing downhill overall, everybody solid drives, being aggressive, getting to the rim, not settling on just kind of post turning your back to the basket and passing out. So that improved. Zach Collins hit a 3 in this quarter, which was huge, and his stroke looks a little bit better, I think, than in last year. Knocking on wood for him. I know he's shooting like at a decent percentage right now, but let's hope this confidence is able to upkeep because it looks smoother. It looks slightly higher arcing. So hopefully that maintains. Again, fantastic pace. Blake is on one. He's playing unbelievable basketball in this quarter. Still cannot defend the pick and roll. I think we gave up 3 lobs to DeAndre Ayton and maybe Donovan Clingan. I don't know if he was involved in that, but we just can't seem to stop the roll man when the ball handler is both a passing and a scoring threat. We're still
Yeah.
miscommunications there. Um, Poor execution at the end of the quarter. I think we had a really bad shot and then a really bad foul to end the half. We lost the quarter 28-23. This is where I started getting a little bit worried, Jude, because Portland had taken that momentum from us going into halftime. But I think it was really just a focus thing, and then shots weren't falling down at as high a clip. But Blake Wesley did his best to kind of soften the blow in this quarter.
Yeah, well, with that flagrant at the end of the quarter, as you mentioned, that was a 5-point possession. Sean Elliott was
Yep.
harping on that on the broadcast, and when you look at the quarter's final score, we lost by 5 points.
Yep.
And
There you go.
also that made it a 1-point game going into halftime as well, instead of potentially, a 5 to 6-point lead. So I definitely agree with that point. There was a big and one dunk from Wemby to start, as you talked about with his aggressiveness. Harrison's drives have been something I wrote down where Harrison's drives have been really solid tonight. You saw his off ball movement as well as his on ball movement. And, kind of some up and under like type layups. Scoot was trying to do the same thing. There were a lot of those that we saw tonight. At this point, I just wrote down Blake is balling. Malachi is balling too.
Blake's into Malachi.
And yeah, we're going to get to him, man. There's so many guys really tonight. Really, like I said, the bench is my main thing. We'll maybe get to them like individually at the end or something as we go through the game. But both of them in the backcourt were huge tonight with the energy as well as their execution. Blake was seeing the floor well, distributing on backdoors. And late in the quarter, like you mentioned, we gave up a 9-0 run. So that was another factor. It wasn't even just the 5-0 flagrant, that they capitalized on at the very end of the quarter. Even just in that latter half, after we went up a little bit, they went on a 9-0 run. So again, keeping that intensity, keeping that consistency, that's what you want to see. So I can see why you were a little bit worried at that point. But the main thing is they locked in after halftime and got it back up. But to finish off this second quarter, the way that I kind of described it was really, it was a quarter of runs. Every time we went up 8-10, the Blazers had an answer.
Right. Usually catalyzed by that pick and roll game, unfortunately.
For sure. Like you said, and while there were some, I was trying to figure out how to verbalize the defensive struggles, and what you're saying in the pick and roll game is exactly what it was.
I hope catalyze is a word. Someone's going to roast me in the comments if it's not. The catalyst was their pick and roll game. Let me rephrase.
There you go. You're using it as like an adjective there.
Yeah. Who knows if it worked?
I understood what you were saying. It worked for me.
Thank you.
On some of the halftime stats that I wrote down, 31-12 bench points at halftime. And the fact, again, that it's a 1-point game with that gap, another reason why the bench was so huge tonight. 18-12 on assists, 59% from the Spurs in the first half, and still 47% from the Blazers, but again, only a 1-point lead on almost 60% shooting. So again, like you were seeing these numbers and it's like, this is good, but also it's like, man, you would think that we'd be up a little bit more with some of these numbers that we were seeing. And then 32-26 is what it was in the paint on paint points at halftime. Obviously that flipped in the second half, but going back to the third quarter, my guy.
Yes, sir. Third quarter. This is where I made my first note about what you touched on earlier, which is, have we seen Steph over CP3 at point guard more often tonight than in previous games? And I think the answer is yes. CP was doing a purposeful job getting Stephon Castle meaningful minutes as the primary facilitator. And honestly, it worked pretty well. At the end of the day, I want Chris Paul with those in meaningful situations, but Stephon Castle proved to me, at least, that he does have that ability. What were his final stats here? I'm looking for. Oh, I forget. He started tonight. He had 6 assists and 0 turnovers, not to mention the 14 points, 6 of 11 from the field. But he was doing a really good job penetrating and dishing and dropping it off to Wembanyama. And he had a couple of nice dishes to Zach Collins as well, where he was like, okay, guys, I don't know why the spacing's all jacked up. Keldon, get out of the lane, or Malachi, get out of the lane. Zach Collins has a mismatch, and he was able to take advantage of that. So good job from Stephon Castle. Julian Champagnie, this is where I really noticed that he was playing a fantastic game, not just from his shooting, 4 for 8 from 3 tonight, but just overall 6 rebounds, Really solid defense, had one steal. Strong ball movement and pace of play continues. This is for me where it kind of hit a peak in this game was
Yeah.
this third quarter where our ball movement was at an absolute best. Overall, the team was shooting better. We kind of got out to a run facilitated by that pace of play. Zach Collins hit another three, so he went 2 of 3 tonight from deep. And honestly, he had a really good overall game, 14 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, efficient shooting, 6 of 7 from the floor. You'd maybe like to see a little bit more rebounding from him, but the rest of the team did such a great job that it kind of, cleans itself out in the wash. Still missing plays on defense from time to time, but Blake, Malachi, and Keldon Johnson are playing very well together. Their chemistry seems to have finally
Meshed.
interwoven together. Oh, meshed is a better word. Meshed together. Hopefully, it can continue as the season progresses and as guys come back from injury.
Yeah, absolutely agree with everything you said. 35-24 in
Mhm.
this third quarter. Imagine, I know that this, look, the Spurs are 4-5. Last night's game was really rough. The
Yeah.
OKC game was really rough. But if you would have came to us last year and been like, hey, in the first 9 games of the season, there's going to be a lot of third quarters where you actually win like by double digits.
Yeah.
We would have been like, we will take that every day of the
Facts.
week. And because of that, I don't have as many notes in this third quarter because we won the quarter by 11, like you said. Still some things to clean up defensively, but we were just knocking down so many shots, and being cohesive offensively with all the ball movement, like you mentioned, that led to open shots and then executing on them. There wasn't really too much to say. So I have Champagny threes huge. Harrison Barnes had a couple possessions where he got offensive boards. He had
Yes.
7 tonight. That again, it wasn't just Harrison. You saw Keldon with 11. When you talk about Zach and saying maybe you'd like to see some more rebound numbers, I totally get what you're saying. But again, in comparison to last season, to see what Zach did tonight, and then you're also going to tell me that Keldon off the bench got us 11 boards.
Yeah.
I'm going to take what Zach did tonight every day of the week under those circumstances. Also, early in the quarter, it got close, and
Mhm.
there was a timeout taken at 62-61. But after that, we just went on that run, like you mentioned. A really solid 3-point shooting night from Malachi tonight, and just scoring overall.
Mhm.
He didn't even play the full game and was still tied to be our leading scorer with Keldon. Really tough that he got hurt tonight. This was a career game for him. Him off the ball, not trying to do too much, letting the game come to him, like we talked about all preseason. I mean, that was really an example of tonight's game. And maybe, okay, you can pick out some of the shots he missed, or, like maybe one defensive lapse here or there. But overall, for Malachi, this is one of the best games, if not his best game, that he's played in the regular season
Mhm.
as a Spur. Here's another thing I wrote down about Zach. He had a 3, like you mentioned, in this quarter, and then on the very next possession, he forced a charge.
Mhm.
And there were a couple moments for Zach like that tonight. Also, you talked about how Steph was able to find him.
Mhm.
And the thing that is also key there for me is that Zach was able to execute under the basket and out physical guys, even if it was a mismatch. Like, it's stark contrast from last year,
Yeah.
and we'll see, we're not sitting here like saying like, oh my gosh, like this is, I don't know, I'm trying to word this the right way. We're not trying to sit here and say Zach Collins is an all-star, but man, I mean, like if he can continue the small improvements that we've seen so far, executing better on threes, being more of a physical presence, like I mentioned earlier in the first quarter, where immediately sends a message to Scoot Henderson, I'm not a free
Yeah.
poster target. Like, as well as also some of the backdoor reads, or I don't even know how many assists he had
Had
tonight.
3.
He did have 3, but we still saw him kind of as that hub. You know what I mean? Where he'd get a handoff to a guy that was almost a hockey assist in a sense.
Mhm.
So yeah, I really liked what I saw from Zach tonight for sure. And
Mhm.
also at the end of the quarter, a solid close to the quarter that pushed the lead out to 12. After we were up 11 and then they cut it to single digits again, responded well to finish off the quarter and win by 11.
I love what you said about Zach. This might be his best game of the year so far. And nothing is crazy improved, but just like nominal improvements in every single category for him. And I think it's really a confidence thing. And the confidence thing can translate to guys like Blake Wesley and Malachi Branham as well. And just to speak on Malachi real quick, 6 of 8 tonight, 3 of 5 from deep. And what I want to re-emphasize about what you said is he was letting the game come to him and not forcing up bad shots just for the sake of being the scorer off the bench. Like he wasn't overdoing anything, and that's when he's at his absolute best, and when he can space the floor and be a catch and shoot guy as well.
Yeah, and you look at Malachi Branham and Zach Collins in the plus minus. Zach had the highest plus minus on the team tonight,
Mm,
plus 12 for Malachi as well. Who knows what it would have been if he would have been able to finish out the game and kept
yeah,
shooting efficiently. Um, so yeah, I mean, those think about it. How much even in the preseason or at the end of last season were Malachi Branham and Zach Collins kind of talking points? You know what I
yeah,
mean for us, and unfortunately, in a lot of critical and negative ways. One game, but still, this was really good to see from them, and I think this has kind of been a progression as the season has gone. Like they've kind of built up to this as
yeah.
the season has progressed. Not saying it's been completely perfect, but an improvement for both of them nonetheless, and some development as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm hoping that these injuries, as unfortunate as they've been for the team, to Devin, Jeremy, Trey, I'm hoping it's opened up, these guys' games because now they've had to step up in ways that maybe they wouldn't have had the opportunity, especially with Malachi Branham, who we didn't even think would maybe break the rotation, and Zach is having to be relied on more as a scorer and as a facilitator as well without Trey Jones there. So maybe this is a small blessing in disguise, and they can carry this confidence forward moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going to the fourth quarter, I'll jump into things here, Ethan. We did have a little bit, kind of, we had to fend them off still. We only won
Yeah,
the quarter 26-27. Um, but honestly, my biggest thing in the fourth quarter is Stephon Castle late
yeah.
in the game, taking over with assists, making clutch shots. You saw him hit a very crisp Paul esque mid range jumper coming off a screen on the right elbow. Um, Man, what were your thoughts on the fourth quarter? My biggest thing was Stephon.
Yeah, I don't have that many notes either. We were able to hold off a small run. Malachi unfortunately got hurt. Early on, I wrote, we need to find a way to get easy baskets because everything is effortful. We turned it around, and I think it was Stefan's poise. And everybody really played with solid poise to end this game. But to fend them off and to still win by, what was it, 14 points at the end of the game?
13. Yeah.
13, excuse me. That shows growth, especially when Wemby wasn't having the best shooting night. 4 of 13. We did not have to rely on him. Everybody else was able to pick up their game. And when it comes from a guy like Steph Castle, who's only 20 years old, um, that really improves our confidence or my confidence in him as a point guard, for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with Malachi Branham getting hurt. I
Yeah.
mean, Stephon Castle was going to get minutes regardless, but breaking news, forgot to mention this. Devin Vassell is expected to be back and make his return this Saturday against the Utah Jazz, according to Shams Charania. So that's going to be good because he's going to be in the starting lineup again. And you would have thought probably off the bench, that we were playing a lineup with Steph at the three at one point, but with Malachi's injury tonight, maybe there is a chance he's back next game. I feel like it's probably going to be a little bit with the way he was walking off the floor, and also with him being ruled out for the rest of the game. Yes, it was late in the game, so it could have just been precaution. But if he is held out for a couple of games, looks like a little bit of an ankle injury. Stephon Castle and Blake Wesley is going to be the backup, backcourt with Keldon, Mamu, and Zach.
Yeah.
So, you know, good to see from Stephon as well, in the sense that he's probably going to be put in that situation even more and have some even more minutes
Mhm.
moving forward. Maybe I'll be surprised though, and we're not going to leave him in the starting lineup with Devin coming back. Um, I was just thinking about that. I was like, maybe we'll leave him in there, but I mean, unless we're going to move, unless we're going to
Julian.
play, yeah, well, that's true. Maybe that's a little bit more realistic than I think, playing Devin at the three, but that's besides the point. The point I was getting at is there will be even more minutes for Stephon
Mhm.
amid Malachi's injury if that continues to persist. That was the first thing I wrote down, is just prayers for Malachi. It doesn't look like a serious injury, but again, with the way that he played tonight, that was just tough to see. We had a solid timeout that I liked at 92 or 93-88 when they cut it to 5. I thought that was big. That kind of helped us right after that. Kind of reassess, reset, and then kind of build that lead up back to 8 or 10, which is kind of what it was for the rest of the quarter. We had a 9-2 run after that timeout. Um, Essentially the whole fourth quarter for us was really just staving off the counter runs. And
Mm.
that's growth. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. I mean, that is something last year that did not happen. You know what I mean? And I
Mhm.
think we've seen that. We obviously didn't see that in the Clippers game on Monday, but I think we have seen that in some other games this season. Um, so hopefully we can continue to see that more and more.
Mm.
Another thing about Zach that I wrote down in this fourth quarter, he had a good contest on Anthony Simons on a step back three.
Yeah.
Like
I
Zach
saw
going
that.
out on the perimeter, getting a stop there. That's something we didn't see very much often. And against an elite shooter who hit a crazy tough three on Wemby at one point in the game. I can't remember. I think that was probably in the third quarter. And the other thing I wrote down, Steph's confidence at this point of the game for a rookie in the situation he was in with the, freedom that the team was giving him just really stood out to me. Also, a really clutch steal from Chris Paul on
Yeah.
DeAndre Ayton under the basket
Crazy.
that would have cut things to 10. And at that point in the game, that's another 30 seconds off the clock. So that was a really big defensive play. Castle fourth quarter takeover. Lots of extra possessions from multiple guys tonight. Like I saw Mamu create some extra possessions. I talked about Harrison, obviously Keldon, just guys fighting on the boards overall. And a lot of good backdoors to close out the game. And that was really another thing throughout the game. Saw backdoors from, whether that was Steph reading them, Wemby making the pass, Blake making the pass, just so much off ball movement tonight that was
Mhm.
cohesive and guys were seeing it that we did not see last night at all.
Yeah, definitely much improved. And looking forward, I know I see some comments, and I've been thinking about it too. Even with defensive lapses, especially in the pick and roll, that's not my number one concern right now. Number one concern is offensive fluidity. Because when we're hitting shots like this, shooting
Right.
41% from three, that's one thing. We can basically do whatever we want. But on nights where Julian, Harrison, Steph, Malachi, Keldon, when they're not hitting deep, um, we've seen Wemby struggle at times just because guys are going to triple team him, and they can because the guys on the outside aren't going to hit their shots. But I think Devin Vassell coming back is going to be massive for the offense because not only can they not double off of Devin because he's a guy that can sure hit the outside shot but create for himself. Um, but we don't have to depend on Wemby to be our only offensive initiator when things aren't going well because it's pretty much just him because maybe Malachi from time to time, maybe CP3 if he's feeling good. Otherwise, who's going to go get us a bucket, Jude, in times when we're going through a lull or the Rockets are on a 20-4 run? It's just Wemby, and he hasn't really been that guy yet because of the defensive schemes against him. So Devin being back, able to relieve that pressure, that should do wonders for the offense overall.
Yeah, and that's another thing why tonight's game, there's so many positives and it really feels good is look, Victor, here's the one thing I'll say. I don't think Victor played a bad game because of the defensive impact that he had.
For
Yes,
sure.
it was a poor shooting night for him, but you also saw some good passes and obviously the attention that he draws offensively opens up looks for other guys, and that's the key. The other guys executed tonight.
Right.
I mean, if you would have told me, yeah, we're gonna have a bounce back game tomorrow night, and we're gonna have all these dudes in double figures, and Wemby's not gonna be, he's gonna be like the third or fourth guy down the list when it comes to the rankings of who scored the most points on the team. I would have been like, I that would have been very low on what I would have expected. So the fact that the rest of the team was able to execute offensively tonight and do it in a cohesive way where it wasn't just, okay, we're getting lucky hitting some ISOs from time to time. Like it was like, no, we're out there playing like legitimate offense, and being able to execute
Yeah.
throughout that. That's again, some growth and especially good to see a bounce back from last night. But the other thing I want to say though, Ethan, that I was thinking about. The last back to back that we had was very similar to this. We got completely blown out and kind of outclassed in the first game, and then we bounced back on the other half. I think that's kind of, that may be a preview of this season in a sense. There's going to be some peaks and valleys, and that's kind of, a part of the journey of becoming consistent if you will. But again, the fact that they bounced back under a game where Wemby is not shooting well offensively, and you're able to win by double digits, this is kind of last year. This is the opposite of what the story was last year when there was a rough game for Victor.
For sure. Couldn't have said it better myself, my friend.
I see we got some comments here. People, this isn't the first one. Andrew Camarillo says, great play up and down the roster. My question is about Wemby. Is he doing okay? He looks fatigued and not playing with force. His defense is incredible as usual, but on O and rebounding, he's struggled. I definitely see what Andrew's seeing. I saw some fatigue from Wemby out there tonight, and I don't think it was an effort thing. I think it's just a gassed thing. He mentioned that in the first game of the season, after the first couple games of the season, that conditioning wise, it was a little bit rough. Honestly, I just think it goes back to his long summer.
Yeah, that's definitely a contributing factor is how much basketball he played over the summer, but also he's still without Devin Vassell, like we just discussed. He's getting triple teamed, and teams have a full season and Olympics to scheme against him now. So I think we're just seeing better defensive strategies because I don't think teams started the year guarding him with wings last time. It was just centers. So now he's having to readjust to that entire situation.
Yeah. And when, you're getting played harder, that's going to make you a little bit more tired. Yeah.
For sure.
On top of his what's the word that I'm trying, his treadmill mileage in basketball terms. From what I'm talking about is the Olympics with that leading into the season, that's also a contributing factor, like you said. The Alamo Visual Archive says if he's healthy, Devin IMO is just as good of a scorer as D-Book. So I really do think he's going to elevate this team's offense. I mean, we've talked about it before. There definitely are shades of D-Book in Devin's game. They're a little bit different in ways, in their own ways, but we've talked about it, man. Devin Vassell is the second best player on this team, in our opinion. Last year, the entirety of the team's offense was the Devin and Wemby two-man game. So, if we can get some performances like this, if we can get even half of the performance we got from the rest of the roster tonight with Devin Vassell, and Wemby playing their normal games, that's going to be enough.
100%. And just to say it because I love saying it, my comp for Devin Vassell is Chris Middleton and/or Rip Hamilton for those Detroit Pistons fans from back in the day.
There you go. Nazkraz11 says Wemby's play is definitely an effort thing. The lack of effort might be due to being gassed, but still almost no rebounding. Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. When I said it like it wasn't an effort thing, I meant like a mental effort thing. It's just like you said, he's gassed. And I understand what you're saying there, but I mean, what was his final rebound total that he ended up getting up to tonight? Okay, only 8. But he still got some, like in the fourth quarter is something I noticed. He had 4 steals and 3 blocks.
He's averaging 9.8 for the season so far.
Yeah, right. He's still basically averaging 10 boards a game. I think, that was kind of a testament tonight. Also, tonight's a back-to-back too. We'll see how he looks on Sunday. And the other thing too, the team rebounded well tonight. Not just Keldon, Harrison. I think Julian, how many did he have? He had 6 as well. So what? You've got what's 18 plus 6, 24. You got 24 boards between Keldon Johnson, Harrison Barnes, and Julian Champagnie tonight. Julian Champagnie, 50% overall from the field, 4 for 8 from 3, 14 points. Love to see that. And you may look at the box score and not think it was a crazy game for Chris Paul. I think he just got out of the way with the other guys playing well the way that they were. And yeah, man, Zach Collins, Keldon Johnson, and Malachi Branham, a big reason, why we won tonight.
Facts. Shout out my guy KJ.
Yes.
Shirt today.
There you go.
Number 3.
Hey, it might be back next season.
You know what? Is armband Zach Collins?
Arm sleeve
Zach Collins. Is he the new like hoodie Mellow?
Maybe it is that. I was gonna say headband Zach, but he wore that last year.
Yeah,
he's arm sleeve Zach.
Headband Zach. Get rid of the headband. That didn't work. That did not work. Let's just stick to the sleeves.
The shooting sleeve. It's the shooting sleeve. That's why he's shooting better.
I told my mom it was a good investment in middle school.
I remember like looking it up, like what are like trying to justify it to my parents. It
Yeah, it's
prevents
just
it prevents elbow bursitis. That's why J.R. Smith wears it.
like we needed that.
I know.
Oh my god, it's so
Uh,
funny.
okay. To wrap up this episode, 9 games into the year, what are kind of some overall positive things you want to see continue, and then some negatives that we can improve on?
Negatives that we can improve on is just offensive scheming, I think, especially when the other guys aren't executing, like you said. Hopefully, Devin Vassell helps that. And then pick and roll defense and maintaining consistency, not across quarters, but across games. Because last year it was an inter game problem,
Yes.
and now it's just like we play really good one night and really bad the next. We have to keep that same level of focus from game to game. And then positives, I guess I would say Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes addition has definitely been a positive as far as keeping guys under control. Um, I feel like our movement is good. We just can't hit shots at times, and then our positioning is bad. So let's continue the ball movement. Let's continue the pace. Let's continue the defensive intensity, even if the rotations aren't always there in pick and roll situations. And then individual performances like from Steph, like Julian Champagny tonight, Zach Collins a little bit, KJ off the bench. Let's continue to grow that. I think those have been positives for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we can have Malachi's shooting
Mhm.
from the outside, that's a positive. Zach just improving in all of the areas, just a little bit. We're not asking him to be something he's not, but if he can continue the way that he's improved in all the areas that we've criticized him in, like interior defense and perimeter shooting,
Yeah.
just continuing to be a little bit better in those, as well as, like you said, at least 15 a night or around 15 a night from Keldon Johnson off the bench. I think, the Trailblazers are probably going to be a team in the same position as us, or maybe even a little bit lower at the end of the day. But if those type of things can happen on the bench, that gives a little bit of leeway for, the starters to not have to play completely out of their minds all the time. And again, all of this is without Devin, and also this game was without Jeremy too.
Yeah. He's probably the biggest positive that neither of us mentioned. Just
Right.
his individual play so far this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then whenever it comes to negatives, honestly, the biggest thing for me, you touched on all the specifics. It goes back to what you said at the end, just consistency from game to game. And if we're being real, that's probably not going to happen. That's kind of why I made the peaks and valleys point.
Mm,
But if we can continue to see that improve over the course of the season, that's really what we've got to ask for at this point.
right. Agreed.
Alrighty, y'all. We appreciate you guys hanging out with our first regular season post game. That was a win. Feels so good. Feels so good, especially
Mm.
with all the context we talked about. And we will be back at some point next week. Me and Ethan are probably going to schedule right after this episode. And so you'll see those pop up on the upcoming live streams tab on our homepage on YouTube. We appreciate all you guys hanging out with us tonight. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button below. Shout out Robert Ball for telling people in the comments. And follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, to stay updated with the show at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan